Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back to the Grafton Community Television Studios. I have a guest today. His name is Andy Deschenes. He is the OPM for the ongoing new library project renovation.
Edition.
What's the preferred word?
It's a renovation edition. Yeah.
Renovation edition.
Sure.
Okay, sounds good.
Yeah.
So how's it going?
It's going great. Our substantial completion date, which is the date that we'll be able to start moving in, is June 8th. And it definitely looks like we're on track for that. So
That's
things
cool.
things are coming along. Yeah.
That's cool.
It's exciting.
So has it been a rocky road at times, or has it been fairly smooth? I know, see, that was a loaded question.
Question.
Yeah, because I know there were a couple of problems.
Yeah, I think a lot of people know the beginning of this project was a little tough. We had three underground storage tanks that were existing on the site that we uncovered and had to deal with. But once we get out of the ground, like with a lot of projects, once we get out of the ground, this one has gone really, really well. Yeah.
So when you have something like that pops up on your plate, and you know that big sigh out, and you think, oh, this is going to suck.
Yep.
But then, do you think that that's it now? I'm jinxed. There's another problem waiting to happen, or do you?
No, I mean, it's one of those projects where there's an existing building component to it, right? So there's always, what's behind the wall kind of thing. It's like the beginning of a project. What's under the ground? You don't always know. But once we got out of the ground, generally speaking, we had a pretty good idea of what was to come. It was all pretty manageable, controllable, and we didn't really find a lot of surprises in the existing building itself, which was great. There's some new wiring that had to happen, but not a lot of surprises. So the risk for the project in terms of cost and schedule went down significantly once we got out of the ground and got all that the underground storage tanks behind us.
So how do you juggle dealing with something that's really hard to do, like dealing with a fuel tank, and then keeping everybody else on schedule? Or does something like that just kind of throw it all out of whack?
It definitely threw us off schedule by about 3 months. But you rely on the team. We had a really good team, a lot of experienced people that have been through this before. Really, what was in the ground was pretty garden variety, heating oil. So it wasn't that hard to dispose of. But we just wanted to be super careful, being a public building that we're definitely inviting the public to on a regular basis. We want to make sure it was really cleaned up, and it has been. It wasn't just the cleanup, but we've been monitoring the site since then to make sure that we've got groundwater monitoring wells and other things, some soil gas testing that's happened, to be super thorough about making sure that we got everything. And so we're really feeling good about the cleanliness of the site now. It hasn't been this clean since the turn of the century.
So the tank comes out, the soil surrounding the tank comes out.
Yep.
Is there naturally just some seepage when you remove it anyway? I mean, or is
not generally, but these tanks were in pretty terrible shape. One looked like it had been hit by buckshot. Yeah, it was pretty amazing. But no, so then we just dig until there's nothing else that shows up. And we've got on-site testing monitors that we use, and we just dig until we get it all.
So when you entered the main building, the first part of the project, if I recall, was where the back half of the building was kind of taken off and taken down. That went smoothly, or did you have any bumps and bruises there?
No, that was good. That was the guy operating the heavy equipment was pretty impressive. He had quite a nice even touch with a pretty major piece of equipment. But they do a real careful job of capping all the utilities ahead of time, making sure that we've got a clean separation from the building that's going to stay. And then when they can bring the big machine in to peel it down, it really went pretty well. It was a little dramatic at times, but all controlled and all went according to plan.
Sure.
Yeah.
Any exciting finds? Documents, papers, photographs?
We have a few artifacts that were unearthed. We've got a clay bottle that's in great shape. And we've got a Texaco sign, I think, and a couple of other little things that came out of the ground like that. They're in my trailer right now. I'm not sure what we're going to do with them, but they'll become part of the history of the site.
Does anybody have any explanation for why the Texaco sign was found?
So that's 2 of the 3 underground storage tanks were related to a gas station that had been there in the 40s and 50s, I think.
Okay.
So there was local lore had told us that there was something that had been there on site, and we found it.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
So then as you progress further out, or heading, let's say, in the direction of the train tracks in Cumberland Farms, the next part was pretty straightforward, I would imagine, because you're erecting the new attachment, so to speak?
Right. We'd removed so much material from the building footprint and replaced it with really high quality material that the concrete part of the job was really straightforward. We knew we were on solid footing. The steel was again pretty straightforward. Two-story building, nothing crazy. I've worked on things that are much bigger than that. And yeah, and once the structure's in place, then it's just all the finer points of construction. And really, we've had a very, very smooth go of it. We've had a few of the key trades, drywall and framing in particular. We had a great foreman, this guy Tony, who was, if you get the right guy in that position, the whole job goes well, and he was a good guy. So that really helped out with all the trades. It's been a really good, enjoyable project to be part of. Really good, solid project team.
So fuel tank aside, which got you off track a bit, COVID comes along, gets you off track a lot, I would imagine.
Not so much, actually. They kind of coincided. So when we were...
Oh, they were that close together?
Yeah,
okay.
They really were. So when we were sort of throttling down to clean up the site, it happened at the same time we were supposed to be shutting down for COVID. But given that we only had probably at most 4 or 5 people on site at a time at that point, the state allowed us to continue the cleanup. It was actually a little bit of a safety issue because we were remediating a little bit and we had an open hole. So we asked for permission to keep going and they gave it to us. And about the time that we were finished doing that was when public projects were allowed to sort of start back up again. So we were in pretty good shape.
And the number of workers on site at any given day, did that fluctuate through the COVID period? I mean, I imagine somebody somewhere must have gotten sick or got a sniffle and thought they needed to quarantine. So.
Yeah, there's been a little bit of that, but not a lot. We've certainly been keeping track of that stuff. We've certainly had COVID measures in place for quite a while now on the job, but it hasn't really impacted us in a huge way. We've had a little bit of some of the smaller trades. Our plumber, for a little while, had a little bit of a staffing issue, but most of the time it really hasn't slowed us down too much. It's been great.
So the day that we came up and saw the final piece of steel put onto the top of the building, you can really kind of see the light at the end of the tunnel at that point, because now you say this is really starting to look like a building, a finished project. And then you get indoors and you're pretty much working 80% indoors and 20% outside because you've got some landscaping to do.
Right, exactly. Yeah, the timeline for this project was really excellent. Actually, even with the delay, we managed to get the building closed in before the winter weather really came. So then with temporary heat, the majority of the work was inside, and if we had any good weather days, we could work outside as well and continue to chip away on the exterior. So yeah, the calendar has been on our side for this one, for sure. Yeah.
So if I remember from our tour, the day we took that, you talked about a portion of the roof having a living roof, if I remember, if that's the right word. Yep. So for those that don't know what that means, me included, what is a living roof?
So a green roof it's simply that there's a modular tray system that's about 2.5 to 3 inches deep that sits in a grid in trays on top of an existing roof. And it's usually like a sedum mix. It's a very hardy, low-growing plant that basically grows in these trays that sits on top of the EPDM roof. And doesn't require a lot of maintenance, does require some irrigation, but other than that, it's a pretty low maintenance thing. It attracts bees, butterflies, birds, things like that, and it's certainly more pleasant than looking out on a white rubber roof from the second floor. So it's going to be a real nice addition to that project, and we're grateful for the people that funded it.
So a heavy snow load or torrential rains don't pose a problem? Because I mean, to my limited knowledge, I'm thinking you've got plants, which means you have soil, and when soil gets saturated, it gets pretty heavy. So that's the puzzle I was trying to kind of work out in my head. And
yeah. So the plants that grow in this, the bed that they sit in is really only 2.5 or 3 inches thick. So it's not a lot of weight. We did have the structural engineer check it out just to make sure that it could take the additional weight, and that includes wet. But otherwise, no. It's made to sit on top of an existing roof like this. The roof has roof drains in it already, so if we get a deluge or something like that, it'll be fine. So yeah, no, we're expecting it to be a really good addition.
Cool. So you have outdoor walkways. You have an outdoor seating area.
Yeah.
Do you have any features on the outside of the building closest to the Grafton Inn, or is that pretty much just parking?
We do. So initially we did not, but we've had just unbelievable responses from our fundraising team and from the community at large to bump up some of the work that we're doing on the outside, so landscaping specifically. We're going to have a new patio just outside the teen area that's going to be a great gathering space for them and really for other people as well. That does face the Grafton Inn. It's pretty good sized. It's got a lot of different types of seating areas. It's got some plantings around it. It's going to be a really nice place. Another option besides hanging out at Dunkin' Donuts, which is, it's good, but this is a good place to be too.
If you're trying to cut down on caffeine,
Right.
go to the library instead. And then the project in the back of the building closest to the train tracks obviously is the parking area.
Right.
And I remember you said there were how many spaces?
So in the old library, I think there were 22 or 24, and now we've got 83 back there.
83 additional or 83 total?
83 total spaces.
Okay.
Yeah. So basically 60 more spaces than we had before, which is quite a large number.
Sure. But I mean, I think I can imagine that most people in town would wish that number was quadruple.
Right. Yeah. Yes. At a certain point, right, for the 3rd of July or whatever, there's never enough parking spaces. But this is going to be a huge difference. I mean, that number of parking spaces is really significant in terms of what we had available to us before. So I think it'll make a big difference.
And then, if I remember correctly, we finished the tour in the existing part of the building, the main part of the building with the high ceilings, and there was a lot of cracked and peeling paint all over the place. So obviously that's on the bucket list to do. What's the vision for the inside of that space? Is that going to be books and book stacks and aisles, or is that more of a sitting and reading area?
So the existing part of the library, the part that most people will remember from coming in and seeing the circulation desk and the historic part of that, is probably going to be one of the most beautiful parts of this whole building. It's going to be fully restored. All the paint and trim and everything is going to get all redone. And instead of being, being a space that's being used for 100 different things, it's really just going to be one large reading room. So it's going to have comfortable seating, low tables, taller tables that you can do research at. There'll be books in the built-in bookshelves still, but it's not going to have sort of the clutter and the multiple uses that it had before. It's just going to be a beautiful place to be able to go, and people will I think they'll be relieved to see that the real, the heart of the library is still here. And in fact, it's never going to look better than it's going to be when we open up. It's really going to look really something special.
And we've scheduled a shoot, kind of a pre-soft grand opening to get in there and show people what it's going to look like. And then, do you have a date for the grand opening?
No, I mean we're going to be able to start moving in the beginning of June. I'm guessing it's going to take us 2 or 3 weeks, and then depending on what we have for COVID and everything else, we're going to figure out how to open up for the public, but we don't have a date yet. I think my guess, I can only guess, right? So right now, my guess would be for the summer would be a sort of a soft opening, and let's kind of get everything up to speed, and then I would think that maybe we'd do a grand opening in the fall. But there hasn't been much discussion about it yet. We've been focused on getting the thing done first, and then we'll figure out the grand opening. But that'll be a really fun day, and I hope a lot of people come to that one. People that were for it, people that maybe weren't for it. It's really going to be a significant community asset for everybody.
So from here to where we're standing right now, to the new DPW facility, to the library project, you must feel like your life's gone like 1,000 miles an hour every day.
It's been fun. It's been fun. 3 very different projects, right? This project was a one-of-a-kind adaptive reuse, funky little building that found sort of the perfect reuse.
I got to write that down. Write that down, Jack. Adaptive reuse.
Yeah.
Got to remember that.
That's a real term.
That's a real term.
The DPW project was one that I really enjoyed. Again, so to talk about the offensive linemen of the town, right? The guys that work real hard and are out there in the middle of terrible storms and don't get a lot of recognition for it. Finally got a facility where they can be safe and warm in and get things done. So it was great. That one was a bit of a struggle, but that one came out great, and so it was good to get through that one. And then the library has been near and dear to my heart forever. My library nerd story that I've told 100 times is that when I turned 16 and a half and could drive somewhere by myself, the first place I went to was the library to return a book. Yeah, so that's librarians love that story.
Yeah, I'm sure they do. I was going to say, it's not very exciting, but
No, but
depends on who the audience is.
Yes, right, yeah, exactly. So yeah, it's been fun. It's been three very different projects of different size, but all I think all important to the town and certainly rewarding in their own different ways.
Sure.
Yeah.
So why don't you take off your OPM hat for a minute and talk
right.
about your involvement down at Gillette Stadium.
Yeah.
Put your doctor's smock on.
Yeah. So my other career that I've had on the side for a long time has been managing road races and race director. And when the need came to set up some mass vaccination sites, the guys that I work with got hired to be the operations and logistics folks at Gillette, at Fenway, at Reggie Lewis, and at the Heinz Convention Center. Since I've done a lot of architecture for a long time, planning and drawing and designing, I've done most of the planning for those sites as well. And right now, yeah, on the weekends, on Saturdays and Sundays, I'm the lead operations person at Gillette. So I'm managing that whole venue and dealing with about a little over 5,000 people a day on Saturday and Sunday. We do about 7,000 plus during the week every day. So yeah, it's an amazing experience. It's been a lot of work, but it's just every day it's a long day, but it's a really good day. The amount of gratitude and relief and joy that you are around with 5,000 people is unbelievable. It really recharges the batteries. Plus, I tend to be chatty sometimes. I'm not sure if you've noticed. But, and so being around a large group of people again is actually pretty fun. I get to interact with a lot of people.
Get to tell your library story.
I tell them my library story. I don't tell them my library story. And again, it's a great team. One of the things I love is being part of a really good team, and we've got some really, really solid people there. My favorite thing about that is, hearing people that have been through there, and not just like you or I coming through, but somebody, Mom, my grandmother was 86 years old and in a wheelchair, and she doesn't get around very easily. And we went to Gillette, and she was in and out of there, and it was so easy. That's the stuff I love to hear, because we have a team there that the answer is always yes. Yes, we can figure it out. Yes, we can get them through. Yes, we can do a better experience for somebody. And we've had some good challenges, but they've all gone really, really well. We've certainly had our days where, a snowstorm is coming, and we get a funny bubble of people, and we get a long line, and things aren't so great, but you learn from that every day and you try to make it better. So yeah, it's been a real interesting, hopefully once in a lifetime experience to be part of that.
So what celebrities have you rubbed elbows with?
Mostly celebrities of the Patriots variety.
Okay.
Yes, we had Josh McDaniel there one night and Matt Patricia the same night. They were actually in the middle of negotiations, so neither of them called me back when I called them to tell them we had a spot for them, but they called me back shortly thereafter. They said they were getting a lot of phone calls at that time.
Right.
So.
When I heard the story that you were involved in Gillette, I immediately came up with this grand story in my head that your phone rang and it was Mr. Kraft, or I just imagined that they just somehow he reached into his Rolodex and he knew Andy's number and called Andy and said, "Get down here, I need your help."
No, Bob and I are not that close. I do have some interesting numbers on my cell phone right now, but I'm going to delete them, I promise.
Yeah, I would imagine it's part of the deal.
Yeah, it is definitely part of the deal.
That's cool.
Yep. Yeah, it's been fun.
Thanks for coming in.
Oh, thank you. It's great.
Enjoyed the chat.
Yeah, same here.
So my guest this afternoon has been Andy Deschenes. He's the OPM for the library project, and wears a couple of different hats, obviously, from our conversation. So thank you for watching. I'm Bob DeToma. On behalf of everyone here at Grafton Community Television, have a great afternoon. My guest, who's standing next to me to my left, is a familiar face if you roam the hallways at the Grafton Municipal Center. His name is Paul Cook, and he's the Assistant Town Clerk. That's an impressive title.
Yeah.
We're going to get the opportunity to get to know you a little bit here, and maybe you'd like to tell us where you're from. Have you been an Assistant Town Clerk before? What kind of background did you have when you came into the job?
Sure. I'm originally from Westwood, Mass, out closer to Boston. I moved out here after my wife and I got married. I live in Whitensville. My background is actually history. I have a master's degree in military history. and my experience is in the museum field, archival preservation. But I have a real interest and a love for government, local government in particular, and that's what attracted me to this position and the community here.
So we're going to quiz you. Before you came in, we were trying to come up with, should we get really, really hard World War II questions, or should we try and find some real softballs? Either way, there might be a couple of questions at the
Sure
end.
thing.
So you had no experience in the role as doing anything in the town clerk's office when you came on board?
Correct. I mean, I was active. I was an active voter and everything. I knew the duties in the office, but I hadn't held a position like that previously. But having a history background definitely strengthened me coming into a role in an office where there was a lot of record keeping, and the importance of being precise with record keeping and preserving records. So that was kind of like secondhand to me. So.
Wow. So you come on board and you are like out of the frying pan and right into the fire, because
Correct.
you got to learn
Correct.
on the go.
Correct. I started at the very end of 2019 and was not here long when the pandemic started. And to date, I've really worked in this position under the COVID situation
Sure.
longer than I did under
Under
pre-COVID
pre-COVID, yeah.
normal circumstances,
Yeah,
so
yeah.
to speak. So that definitely has been a big learning curve, but we've succeeded. And
So what was that first month or 6 weeks like? You must have gone home and said to yourself, "What have I done?"
well, it was funny when I first started here. It was definitely kind of that honeymoon period. It was an odd-numbered year, so there were the fewest elections you could have, and it was the end of the year, so things were ramping up for census work and stuff we do at the beginning of every year. But it was quiet, and then the rubber met the road right away in 2020, and we were off, and we had three elections then, and not to mention the presidential one. And
Sure. Yeah. So you were, as I said in the opening, you were a pretty familiar face around town. I mean, you were down here when the studio was available for
Correct.
early voting, and when Candy LaValle, the town clerk, went off on a leave of absence, you were left to take the helm
I
of
was
the
at the
ship, so
helm.
to speak.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
And
Had some great help though.
I'm sure you did. I'm
Yeah.
sure you did. But that still must have been a pretty scary. How much time on duty did you have before Candy went out?
Well, it's interesting when the pandemic really hit at the beginning of the year, and our office was trying to figure out how do you staff an office where people, the birth certificates, births and deaths don't pause for anything. So I had some experience doing the duties of the office myself, and being at the helm. But the first little bit, it was a little stressful. Being entirely in control of stuff and being the one making decisions. But I very quickly became very comfortable in the role, gained a lot of confidence, and very quickly realized that, I can do this, and it's going to be fine.
What was the scariest moment that you can think of? I know what I would say if I were you.
What would you say?
The phone's ringing off the hook.
Well, that definitely was part of it. There were a couple moments coming right down as the election got real close at the beginning of November. The thing that jumps to mind, honestly, is there was an issue in Boston. I don't know if I should say the community, but they'd had a ballot box issue that had been tampered with. And I didn't have a concern that ours was going to be tampered with. Because of the really great security we have here in the community in general, but it was kind of like, here's yet another thing I got to worry about on having all these plates in the air.
So when you refer to a ballot box, are you talking about a drop-off box?
drop-off box.
Where the public had access? Okay,
Correct,
all right,
yeah.
great. And we had one too,
We have one too.
but
Yep.
it was pretty secure.
Definitely.
Yep.
I had no concern
Yep.
about it. I still don't have any concern
Right,
about it at
right.
all, but it was just kind of something in the back of your head. We're trying to plan for all these possible contingencies, and it was like yet another thing that came up. So, but like I said, there were no issues, and
Wow. So how often do you get asked about the controversy over the ballots that were discovered? I mean, do you find that people are sympathetic to that?
more often than not.
Yeah.
We've had it come up a couple times, but we've been able to explain what happened, and put that behind us. We learned from it, and it's not going to happen again.
Yeah, that's good. A lot of times, excuse me, a lot of times when you make a mistake, and we say it here all the time, we make a mistake, wow, we learned something today.
Correct.
And now we can go forward and we know,
Correct.
yeah, it's not going
Absolutely.
to happen again. Only, in that incidence and what goes on here, when we screw up, everybody in town sees it because it's, and it gets played over and over and over again because it's been recorded.
It's a fact of being in the public light,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
being in
Yeah.
a role of government
You
at
just
some
gotta
level.
suck it up and just keep going.
Yeah.
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 So, so what are you looking forward to in the future? Are you looking to perhaps pursue a town clerk's job in the future, or are you happy with what you're doing now, or?
I'm happy with what I'm doing now. I'm curious to see what opportunities I might have in the history field. What I mentioned at the beginning of the interview, that's what my backing is what much of my experience is in. And we'll just have to see.
Do you have a particular part of World War II history that you enjoy more than another, or?
In recent years, since I had attended Norwich University, where I got my master's, I've had a real interest in amphibious warfare and that aspect of it. And that's in both theaters, Pacific and European. But it's very different. It's a different animal when you're in one theater compared to the other. And geography and climate play into that. Yeah, that's definitely something that interests me, and the air war aspect of it as well interests me.
Okay. Well, I think we'll jump off of that phrase, the air war, and see, what you might be able to answer, what you might know about World War II. So the first question that we got together and we came up with was, can you name the two most prominent fighters that the Royal Air Force used in the Battle of Britain?
Would have been the Supermarine Spitfire and the Hawker Hurricane.
You got it. I told you you'd get it. All right. And then now we'll go to the Pacific. Do you know the name of the ship that delivered the atomic bomb?
Would have been the USS Indianapolis.
All right,
the
that's two.
Tinian Atoll.
It's two, boys. You got it. Now I'm hard-pressed to remember what the third question might have been. Oh, yeah, I got it now. Do you know which American tank used in World War II was referred to as the Zippo?
The Zippo. That'd be the Sherman.
Oh, is the other question? Oh, there was a fourth question. Do you know where Dutch Harbor is? It's a World War II point on the map.
Yes. It's on the northern coast of Australia, I believe.
No, it's actually in Alaska.
That's right. Yeah.
Yep, it's in Alaska. So the Japanese invaded that part of North America during World War II.
I was confusing it with
Yeah.
Darwin.
So have you had an opportunity to talk to the town administrator? Because he's a big fan of the Sherman tank. Did you know that?
I have not had a chance to talk to him about tanks specifically.
Well, now you have a
But
reason.
now I have a reason.
His favorite tank is the Sherman tank.
Okay, there we go. The
little
Zippo.
the little things you learn in the hallway when you're talking.
Yeah,
talking
I'll have to
them.
mention that to him the next time I see him.
Yeah. So your background in archival, historic, I guess what's the word I'm looking for?
Preservation.
Documentation,
Yeah.
preservation. Thank you. That's a great word. So, is that something that you studied at Norwich, or?
No, I studied that during my undergrad.
Okay.
I'd actually had the opportunity to intern. I later worked part-time at the Patton Estate in South Hamilton, Mass. General George S. Patton's estate. And they have a pretty extensive archive there of documents relating to the World War II Patton, as well as his son, who was a general in Vietnam. He commanded the 11th Armored Cavalry Regiment, and he served, I want to say, between 5 or 6 tours of duty there. And he had a lot of artifacts there and documentation that we got to read through and look at and answer some inquiries.
I'll have to look that up. I wasn't aware that Patton had an estate.
He did.
Wow.
The older Patton, who had served in World War II, he unfortunately didn't really get to enjoy it, as he died in 1945 before he had a chance to come home and really retire there. But his son did live there extensively.
Fascinating. The stuff you learn here on Grafton Community
Yeah.
Television. That's great. Well, I want to thank you for coming in. I
Thank
know
you for having me.
you were a little concerned about what some of the questions were. I hope you realize it was just meant to be lighthearted and fun, and
Yeah.
we call it the Get to Know You segment.
Yeah,
And
it's been a good opportunity to chat with you. And,
learn a few things, and maybe the people who come and see you in Town Hall now know a little bit more about you, other than
absolutely.
sitting back there slaving away on those papers.
And I'm happy to talk about history with anybody who's interested.
Yeah, you might get overwhelmed now.
Now, I might. The inquiries
You
will come
never
in
know.
now.
Knocking on the glass at the front with their COVID mask
That's
on.
right.
I'm here to talk about tanks.
With their World War II questions.
All right, well, thank you again for coming in. My guest has been Paul Cook. He's the Assistant Town Clerk here for the town of Grafton. And you have been watching Grafton Minute by Minute. I'm Bob Totoma, and thank you for watching.